Hey folks, welcome to Money and Politics. It's October 26th, and I hope you had a good day. We're going to be doing some interesting things today, and I am going to be a little harsh today, and I'm going to do it for a reason, because sometimes you need to be harsh. You need to say things that, if being nice doesn't get the message across. My point is to make you money, and I don't want you to be following the comments of people who are making stupid comments. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, somewhat. Stupidity, okay? So let's get to it. Now I'm going to talk about two things today because we got two big stories. One, I'm going to talk about InMode and their earnings that came out this morning right before the market. And then I'm going to talk about what Brian Foote did right after I made my video last night. He came out, which probably a lot of you have seen, and posted about what he's looking to do with the B shares. So I'm going to talk about that too, because I didn't talk about it last night. And I'm going to somewhat combine those. So here's the deal. Today, InMode came out with their earnings call. I'll get to the details in a minute. But here's the chart. And when we talk about stupidity, look at the early part of that chart. So the earnings came out, and yesterday it was like at 87.44. And all of a sudden, it just fell like a rock down to about $80. Okay? Now, when I talk about stupidity in the marketplace, I could probably talk for an hour, and I'm trying to condense my thoughts. But here is an example where we are charting stupidity. Okay? Why? Why are we? Because for whatever reason, these idiots who are selling, you're selling one of the greatest companies that is out there and that you want to hold on to for a long time. And I'll go into why. So I'm not just making casual conversation. I'm going to say why you want to be holding on to this for a long time. And then what happened? Well, number one, if one went in and bought the stupidity, and I tweeted about this early this morning when it was happening, if you bought it at 80, you would be up $7.50, almost 10% in one day, because it managed to come back and have a gain of 7 cents. Not that the 7 cents is amazing, but folks, here's a one-year chart. And it hasn't been around for 5 years. Well, okay. You want to get out of a company that's growing like this? You want to get out of a company that has, as I said last night, exceeded its sales, revenue projections every time, its quarterly earnings every time? Really, you want to get out of that kind of a company? Try to find a company like this. Now, the good part is the volume today was about $2 million, just under 2 million, where it's normally about 3.5 million shares traded. So at least the stupidity was limited. Now, I've showed you this chart before, and let me take myself out. This is when InMode was projecting earlier in the year that they would have revenue for the whole of 2021 at between 250 and 260 million. That is no longer true, because what they have already done when they came out with their second quarter earnings is projected that their revenues might be as high as 347 million. I'm going to round up because I wouldn't be surprised if they once again have more revenue in the fourth quarter. And I'm going to round up and say they're probably, InMode is probably going to end up 2021 at about $350 million a year in sales, which would be $100 million more than what they projected earlier in the year. And at $350 million, that would be $150 million over last year's earnings, or revenues, over last year's revenues. It would be $150 million over last year's revenues of $206 million. Well, I mean, my goodness, folks, that's an increase of what, 75% or so? I'm doing it off the top of my head. Now, let me share with you. So, once again, what did we have? We had these morons selling today. When it came out, oh my goodness, there's something I didn't like, and I'm going to sell that and jump off this money train. There is stupidity around, and the one thing I want to nail down here, folks, my theme for today is don't follow stupid, okay? If you have a company that is growing, you want to be on that train. You don't want to jump off of it. You want to go along for the ride. Doesn't that make sense? Now, not only is InMode growing rapidly, their earnings are also growing. So let me bring that up. And this is from the sales call of today. Not the sales call, the earnings report. The CEO was on the earnings report. And in the earnings call, it was said that the United States was once again and by the way, they had 94 million and change. I don't have it right in front of me right at the moment. $94 million for the quarter. Remember, last year, the whole year was $206 million. They did 94, I think, 0.6 million, 94.2 million for the third quarter. Just the quarter, 94.2 million for the third quarter, which was a 58% increase over the same time last year. And that's about 50% in the third quarter revenues, 50%, almost 50% of what they did all of last year. And this is what people want to jump off of. I'm pointing out, and my point here isn't that I'm smarter than these morons. I'm pointing out that, folks, you got to be careful who you follow, and don't be following stupid, okay? We're going to go on with that thing because there's a lot of stupid out there these days. Let me read this, what I intended to do. So here from the earnings call, the U.S. was once again a major contributor to our top line with sales totaling $62.6 million compared to $41.9 million for the third quarter last year, reflecting a 53% increase. It's worth noting that the Empower radio frequency was recently launched and currently limited to the United States as we focus on early adopters in the gynecological space. This strategy will lay the necessary groundwork for successful introduction to a global market. And so what I'm going to insert here, folks, is I want you to pick up on this. As much as this company is growing, they're going to grow more. And that's why you want to be on this train. They're going to grow more. Because one, they just are getting into the gynecological space, as it says here. Let's move on to another point from today's earnings report. And they say, we currently operate in 72 countries and expect that number to rise as we seek to expand into new markets. That's why they're going to go even higher. We are currently exploring establishing a new subsidiary in another major European market, which we hope to begin operations in the first quarter of 2022. So, again, what that means is that's reason that they're going to be building even more sales. They're going to be expanding more in other countries, and they are expanding their services. And so I think where this company, InMode, INMD, where they are currently saying that they're going to do around 347 million, I'm going to call it 350 million this year, because I wouldn't be surprised it'd be a rounding error to hit that. I'm going to say that I think this could be a $1 billion in revenue company within somewhere between the next 3 to 5 years. So when they're doing 350, I think they could triple their sales. And not that they're going to stop there necessarily, but what I'm saying is that you're good to go, in my estimation, on InMode. You got to make your own decisions, right? I'm not a financial guy. I mean, I'm an investor of 40 years, but you got to make your own decisions. But don't be off on, it's $87 a share. Let's call it $88 a share. They just did a 2-for-1 split. This is a good time to buy after that split. And I would strongly encourage you to think about buying based upon what we're hearing here. And the other thing is, they were fighting, as everyone was, COVID. And they're, presumably not going to have COVID hanging over their head all the time. And so they said, despite summer slowdown, sales from consumable and services remain strong, representing 10% of our total revenue of $9.1 million. I'm sorry, let me skip ahead here because that was a subsector. Our minimally invasive surgical technology represents 73% of our revenue for the quarter, 73% compared to 59% in the quarter last year. So again, they're growing their sales. I'm skipping around here looking at the president of North America and what he had to say. The soft launch of EmpowerRF has been instrumental in giving us the necessary insight to create an effective strategy as doctors and patients learn how to better navigate life under COVID-19 pandemic. Part of our marketing strategy is to increase the number of in-person events, in other words, talking to doctors in person, showing them what InMode can do and training the doctors on how they can operate this equipment, etc. So they want to increase the in-person events that we host in the coming months. Such events allow us to familiarize ourselves with the medical and wellness community with InMode's comprehensive product portfolio. So this is not a company that you want to ignore, and this is not a company that you want to get out of. And imagine these people that were selling InMode back in the day, back in 2018, when they were only doing, somebody was selling it back then. When they did $100 million for all of 2018, which was only 3 years ago, and now we're going to have, in 2021, we're going to end up having revenues of about $350 million, 3.5 times what they did just 3 years ago. So when I say that they could grow it another 3 times to $1 billion in 3 to 5 years, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think I am on target. And this could be like a snowball where as you grow, for a while, at some point, InMode will, the market will become mature, they'll top out, and their growth will be harder and harder to grow. But right now, I think they are in the growth mode, and that's where you can get in on companies in the growth mode and ride them up and up and up to your betterment financially. Now, let's move over to what's going on with Humble. And yesterday, right after I did the my report to you guys, I got Brian Foote put out this tweet, and he was addressing the B shares. And Brian also had addressed the B shares back in, I apologize, I'm trying to bring this up. I thought I had it sitting here. Brian, in the sales call in Nashville, addressed the B shares and talked about it. And so what does that tell us? What that tells us is that Brian has long had this on his mind. He is sensitive to this as a topic and knows it is one of the things that is bothering investors and keeping the stock reduced. So Brian put this out yesterday, and it says, "Dear Humble shareholders, thank you for your continued belief in Humble. We're doing everything we can to build a great company on your behalf. I want to address the head-on concerns regarding the potential dilution that could occur when the Series Bs are eligible for conversion into common stock beginning in December of this year." Now, I've had people saying online in response to some of the videos I put out, oh, you know, we're going to be diluted. And I said, we're not going to be diluted. These B shareholders are not going to want to sell their shares at 70 cents. They got in to make a lot more money than that. But nevertheless, it's, you know, again, what's the theme of today? And I'm being a little harsh, but I'm trying to be harsh, not to be mean, but to drive home the point that let's not be stupid, folks. Stupid doesn't make you money. Stupid makes you get off of stocks that you should stay with, like the idiots that were selling InMode today and sold it down at $80. Idiots. People that sold it in 2019, people that sold it in 2018. So Brian says, look, number one, I'm the CEO, and I have about 43.5% of all the B shares. And that's that, I can't point to it, but that's of the three segments, it's the one on the right. Hopefully you can read that. As you know, I already committed to locking up all of my shares through all of 2022 at a minimum. And that represents 41.9%. So he's not going to sell any of his B shares for at least another 14 months at a minimum, and maybe not then. Of course, he doesn't know where the share price will be. And at some point, he wants to make some money here. He also just took $100 million worth of shares off the table. Don't forget, about 2 months ago? Then we have the co-founders, and he says, my Humble co-founders, Jeff Hinshaw, Michelle Rivera, and Karen Garcia, have committed to selling no more than 1% of their holdings per quarter through December 31. Their pool represents 14.6% of the total B shares. So, again, you have a good block, and that leaves 41.9. And those are held by the early investors. And with the early investors, and that's part 3 here, he goes, we will be sending out a shareholder consent to our preferred B shareholders this week, requesting that they approve an amendment to our certification of incorporation to include the following strict conversion limits with respect to their total holdings of B shares, a maximum of 5% sold in this year, a maximum of that. And then a maximum of 5% in January of 2022, and then a maximum of 3% per month from February through May of 2023, through February of 2022 through May of 2023. And he says this pool is 43.5% of the total B shares, and that we will memorialize the outcome of those voting results by Friday. So in other words, they'll make them out Friday, October 29, 2021, along with any requisite filings based upon the results. We make no guarantees or assumptions about the outcome of this vote, but he is saying what he's going to do with his shares. So, number one, this again is where Brian Foote is saying that he hears your concerns and he's acting on it. That's a good thing. That's the kind of CEO you want. And he's reaching out and getting others in the B share holders to say, look, let's verbally say to our shareholders out there that we, the B shareholders, are going to be very conservative in the sales of our B shares, and that we're, going to limit that. So you're still going to have people out there, the FUD gallery, doing what they do and bitching and moaning. But what I would say is, some people are just going to bitch and moan. Now, what I would say about stupid is, the other thing is, all this year we've been fighting people, and let's take a look real quick before we end here for the day. Humble was pretty flat. I mean, I remember this morning saying it was about 70 cents, and let's see where it goes, and it got up a bit higher, got up to about 77 cents, but fell down here, and whatever. And, here's the thing, folks, just as I would say about InMode, that you want to hold on to this because it's going to go higher. You got a company here that is brand new. I have to keep saying this. This is brand new. The difference, one of the differences between InMode and Humble is that InMode operated for 3 years before it went public. Humble, as we know, did a SPAC and became public before it really was operating. What they bought was, Tesoro Enterprises, TSNP, and that allowed them to come public right away, but it also meant that they had all of the building of the company that they had to do. And I've talked about this now since January. So you're familiar with it. And I guess what I'm saying is, to any of you who are wavering, and I don't know if you're wavering or not, because I think we're probably in Humble, we're either in the camp where we get it and we're going to hold on as the revenues are going to be coming out on the services that now we have, and that Humble will continue to be having over the years. I'm getting a weird reflection. I don't know if that's the sunlight coming through. But anyway, you're either in the group where you get it, or you're in the group probably where you're complaining. And what I don't quite understand is, folks, if you're in the group where you don't like Humble, then don't own it and move on and go somewhere else. And you don't need to listen to me talking about Humble. I mean, it doesn't bother me if you want to complain, but I don't see where it's doing you any good. So I hope I kind of drove home the point. I don't mean to be unnecessarily rude to anyone in particular, but sometimes to me it's just so obvious, and it's often not obvious. But I am of the opinion, after doing this for 40 years, that some people, they think they're smarter than everyone else, and so they try to jump in and out. Now, I'm going to sell it when it's higher and get back in when it's lower, and if you can do that if you want. My attitude is it's kind of like hitchhiking. I think I mentioned right after high school, I hitched around Europe for 3 months. It's kind of like hitchhiking. If you find someone going your direction, they don't have to be going the whole way, but just, grab a ride and go along with them as long as you can. And where you want to go, where you're hitching to, or your ride to, is you're on the road to wealth. That's where you're trying to get to. And along the way, you're going to hitch a ride. And right now, I would encourage you to hitch a ride with InMode and stay on that ride, as I say, for 3 to 5 years. You can judge why, we're going to look at the quarterly earnings. And then the other one, I'm hitching a ride with Humble. And I'm going to be looking at Humble as it grows, the revenues, because we haven't been able to talk much about revenues this year as they have been putting the company together. But now they have the company together, and so now we're going to be able to, beginning in a nascent way in the third quarter here with Humble, we'll be getting the earnings, but more in the fourth quarter, more in the first quarter then, and of 2022, and then there on out. And so I would applaud Brian Foote. He has his ear to the ground to what the shareholders are concerned about, and he is, as a leader should, taking action to address those concerns. I think that's the kind of CEO you want, and I would applaud him. So with that, folks, I'm going to cut it off. I know I went long today, but we had a lot to talk about. So thank you as always for joining. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you want to write me, please do. And follow me on Twitter. And I was tweeting some today. There's a lot of times when I don't, but I did want to put out some of those earnings information. So for now, I'll say goodbye, and hopefully I'll be talking to you again tomorrow night.